They moved around Jericho 7 times, and then they entered and took down Jericho.
Ndagira ngo ngubwire uyu mugoroba imiryango yawe yose ikinze Imana iguhaye ubushobozi bwo kwinjiramo kugira ngo ufate ibirenze ibyo basanze i Yeriko.
And I want to pronounce to you tonight that God has given you the power to enter through the gates that have been shut against your life. You will enter and you will take all that you should take.
Ufite amasezerano yo gufata i Yeriko nubwo hari abandi bayaryamyemo, nubwo hari abandi bayasinziriyemo, nubwo hari abandi bazitiye n'inzitiro ngo utahagera. Imana dukorera irakwinjiza mu masezerano yawe. Hallelujah!
You have the promises of God to enter your very own Jericho, even though it looks surrounded, even though it looks surrounded by so powerful armies and stones. You have the power to walk in and take what belongs to you.
Ndagira ngo nkwibutse nubwo abafite amasezerano yawe bakorana n'abapfumu baja mu gasumo ka mwaro kuraguzayo ntacyo bazagutwara mu izina rya Yesu. Humura!
I want to remind you that those who hold your promises, even though they engage in sorcery and witchcraft, they will not do anything to your life. Hallelujah.
Nta mupfumu w'i Burundi, nta mupfumu wa Tanzania, nta mupfumu wa Congo uzahagarika ibyo Imana yavuze ku buzima bwawe.
There is no witch or sorcerer in Burundi, in Congo, in Tanzania who will achieve any plan against your life.
Hallelujah!
Hallelujah.
Imana yashimye ko winjira muri Kanani urahagera.
God chose for you to enter Canaan. You will enter Canaan.
Imana yashimye ko abana bawe binjira muri Kanani bazahinjira.
God chose for your children to enter Canaan. They will enter Canaan.
Imana yashimye ko ministeri yawe yinjira mu by'Imana yihamagariye kugeraho uzayigeramo.
God approved for your ministry to achieve what is meant to achieve. You will achieve it.
Uyu mugoroba ndakubwira ngo nta mbaraga zirenze iz'Imana yacu.
I'm here to tell you tonight that there is no power greater than the power of our God.
Ntiyagira umuntu wundi ukubesha ngo abapfumu barakomeye, abarozi barakomeye, ntiyagira umuntu ukubesha ngo isi y'umwuka irakomeye, nta kikomeyeho. I Yeriko hakoreshaga umwuka, bararaguraga kurusha abandi bantu, ariko ntibyabujije Yoshua n'Abisirayeli kwinjiramo. Hallelujah!
I want to tell you tonight that let no one fool you that witches and sorcerers have power, or the spiritual realm is so powerful. Jericho engaged in witchcraft. Jericho engaged in sorcery. But they couldn't stop Joshua and the armies of Israel from entering Jericho.
Abana bato bari bagize imyaka 40 mu bugaragwa uwo munsi binjira mu masezerano yabo.
Young children who had spent 40 years in the wilderness entered their promises that day.
Bari bayowe n'abagabo babiri bakuru gusa bonyine babonye muri Egiputa, babona mu bugaragwa, babona ni Kanani, yari Yoshua na Caleb.
They were led by 2 old men who had experienced Egypt and the wilderness, and that was Joshua and Caleb.
Abo bana basa n'abasuzuguritse badafite experience y'ubuzima uwo munsi binjiye mu masezerano y'Imana.
Those young people who seemed inexperienced and unused to the circumstances they were walking in entered the promises of God in their
Abana
lives.
bavukiye mu bugaragwa, abana batamenye ubuzima, abana batasobanukiwe kubaho neza, bari barishwe n'imvura, bicwa n'izuba, bicwa n'umusenyi wo mu bugaragwa, uwo munsi binjira mu gihugu cy'amasezerano.
Children who were not experienced to a good life, children who were born and raised in the wilderness, they knew nothing else besides the wilderness. But that day, they walked into Jericho.
N'abana batari bazi iby'isi.
They didn't know things of this world.
N'abana batari bazi ibintu by'amazahabu, batari bazi ibintu by'amafeza, bari bazi gusa manu imanuka iva mu ijuru.
They didn't know gold. They didn't know silver. All they knew was the manna that they ate in the wilderness.
N'abana batari bazi amazu y'amagorofa maremare, n'abana batari bazi amabarabara, ariko uwo munsi binjira mu gihugu kirimo amagorofa, kirimo amabarabara, kirimo amazahabu, kirimo ifeza, kuko Imana yarabahaye ni iwabo. Iwanyu hari byinshi, i Kanani wawe byahawe hari byinshi mwene data.
They were not used to tall buildings. They were not used to streets. They had only lived in the wilderness. But that day, God allowed them to walk into Jericho and experience and take their promises. The same applies to you tonight. God is inviting you to enter your promises.
aba ni abana baryaga iyo manu yamanutse bagategereza kwizongera kumanuka, ariko none bafite imirimo imbere yabo, bashobora gutotora bakarya, bashobora guteka bakarya, bageze mu bundi buzima batigeze bagera.
These were young people who were never experiencing anything else besides the wilderness. They only ate manna once a day when God would send it. But now God has given them a land. They will cultivate the land. They will eat things they didn't know could happen to them.
Hari paralelism hagati ya Edeni na Yeriko, cyangwa se hari ibyenda gusa hagati ya Edeni na Yeriko.
There is a parallel image between Eden and Jericho.
Yeriko Imana yarababwiye ngo muzarya byose ntimuzakore kuri iki giti. Yeriko Imana yarababwiye ngo ntimuzagira ikintu mufata cyose kiri muri iki gihugu.
When you look at the Bible, in the book of in Genesis, the Bible tells us that in Eden, God told them, you will eat everything except this tree. But when they got to Jericho, He told them, you will touch nothing, absolutely nothing in this land.
Ariko inzahabu muzazifata n'ifeza mubishire mu bubiko bw'inzu y'Imana.
You will only take the gold and silver and put it in the house of God.
Bari binjiye Kanani mu gihugu cy'amasezerano.
They were entering Canaan, the promised land.
Cyasaga na Edeni yabo.
It looked like the Eden of that time.
Imana yabwiye ngo ntimuzagira icyo mukoraho.
God told them to not touch anything else.
Ariko bahaje kunanira, umugabo witwa Akani abona ibyaho arabyifuza arabitwara. Ni nkuko Eva nawe yabonye imbuto nziza arayifuza arayitwara arayirya.
But then a man called Achan saw something and desired it and stole it and kept it. The same applies to Eve. Eve saw the forbidden fruit, she desired it and she took it.
Icyabaye niki?
What happened?
Icyabaye nuko wa mugabo wa Akani bamwishe. Niwe muntu wa mbere wapfuye mu Bisirayeli binjiye mu gihugu cy'amasezerano. Niko Adamu na Eva bapfuye mu buryo bw'umwuka nabo bamaze gukora icyaha.
What happened is that Achan became the first man to be stoned and killed in Israel when they had entered the promised land. And the same applies to Adam and Eve. They died first in the spirit after committing sin.
Uwo munsi bamaze gufata Yeriko.
When they had taken Jericho.
Uwo munsi bamaze kwafushiriza umuntu.
When they had lost Achan.
Umuryango wose wa Akani wapfuye.
When the whole family of Achan was stoned.
Ibyari byoroshye.
It was not an easy
Imana
day.
ibwira Yoshua ngo.
God told Joshua.
Muri Yoshua 6:26.
When you read Joshua 6:26.
Ngo Yoshua aca amahani abantu. Aravuga ati nihagira umuntu uhaguruka akazokubaka iki gisagara cy'Yeriko aravumwe imbere y'Uhoraho. Igihe azokubaka itanguriro ryaho azobura umwana we w'imfura, kandi igihe azotera ibikingi by'amarembo yaho azobura umwana we w'umuhererezi.
At that time Joshua pronounced this solemn oath: cast before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son he will lay its foundations, and at the cost of his youngest he will set up its gate.
Uko niko byagenze, uko Adamu yabuze Kaini akabura na Abeli, umwe akoroma akajiyo undi nawe agapfa.
And that's what happened to Adam. He lost Abel, and he also lost Cain when Cain became a wanderer in the world.
Icyo gihe ibaze kwinjira mu masezerano, umaze kubona diplome yawe ugahita wicwa n'imodoka, umaze kubona umugore wawe umugabo wawe ukagira imbanuka. Niko bimereye umuntu yinjiye Kanani ntabirye akabirebesha amaso gusa. Hari abantu benshi bari muri uwo muvumo wabafashe, iyo bageze Kanani niho bahura n'ingorane zikomeye.
And this happens to people today. You have just entered your Canaan, you've just entered your promises, but then you die to an accident, or you lose your husband, you lose your wife, you lose children. This has happened to so many people after entering their promises.
Aravuga ngo igihe umuntu azotangura gushyiraho intanguriro rya Yeriko, umwana we w'imfura azopfa.
He said, cast before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city at the cost of his firstborn son.
Natangira gutera ibikingi by'amarembo yaho azabura umwana we w'umuhererezi.
And at the cost of his youngest he will set up its gates.
Ndagira ngo mbibutse ko
I want to remind you,
iri jambo rirakomeye.
this word is very powerful.
Riravuga ngo ku giciro cy'umwana we w'imfura, cyangwa se le prix, amaraso y'umwana we w'imfura niho azubaka, amaraso y'umwana w'umuhererezi niho azasana ashireho amarembo.
The Bible here says, at the cost, the blood of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundation. And the cost of his youngest, he will set up its gates.
igihe cyose cy'abacamanza muri bibiliya,
Every time in the book of Judges in the Bible,
igihe abacamanza babaye imyaka amajana ane,
we find that Judges lived for 400 years,
gushyiraho ingoma ya Samweli, ingoma ya Sawuli
leading to the kingly
n'iya
rule,
Dawudi,
to the rulership of Saul,
kuzageza
and
ku ngoma ya Ahabu,
from Saul to Ahab.
birafata imyaka hafi amajana atandatu.
It took around 600 years.
Hafi imyaka amajana atandatu nta muntu n'umwe urubaka i Yeriko.
It had been 600 years when no one had built Jericho.
I Yeriko
Jericho.
hari harabuze uhubaka
No one could dare build it
kubera ijambo Uwiteka yahavuze,
because of the word of the Lord upon Jericho.
ariko wari umujyi ukomeye cyane,
But it was still a powerful
wari
city.
umujyi ufite histoire, amateka maremare.
It had a known history.
Ibyaho zaribagiranye,
They had forgotten about it.
byaje kugenda gute?
What happened in
Mu
Jericho?
gitabo cy'abami ba mbere 16:34
When we go to the book of 1 Kings 16:34,
ngo ku ngoma ya Ahabu niho umugabo witwa Hiyere w'i Beteli yubatse i Yeriko. Acubaka, itanguriro ryaho abura umwana wiwe w'imfura yitwa Abiramu, maze agitera ibikingi by'amarembo yaho abura umwana wiwe w'umuhererezi yitwa Seguvu, nk'uko ijambo ry'Uhoraho ryavuze arivugiye mu kanwa ka Yosuwa mwene Nuni.
in Ahab's time, Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of his firstborn son Abiram, and he set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son Segub, in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken by Joshua the son of Nun.
Ndagira ngo wumvire ijambo.
I want you to pay attention to this word.
Iri jambo mu Giheburayo
In Hebrew,
hari ukuntu ritandukanye gatoya nuko ikirundi bavuga,
it is a bit different from how it is said in Kirundi.
ariko ndagira ngo mu Cyongereza byenda kuvuga rimwe.
It's almost similar in English.
Baravuga ngo acubaka ngo itanguriro ryaho abura umwana wiwe w'imfura yitwa Abiramu. Bavuze gutaho?
They said he laid its foundations at the cost of his firstborn Abiram.
At the cost. Ni ukuvuga ngo agiye kubaka aha yabanje gutanga ikimazi cy'umwana we w'imfura.
When he went to lay the foundations of Jericho, he paid the cost.
I looked a lot different.